there, I'm Jessica with Olive Jess, and today I'm going to make zesty turkey meatballs. I have made these meatballs a million times, and they're pretty much made the same way every time, but I will tweak them based on what I have on hand, because sometimes I've run out of something, or I'm meal prepping at a client's house and they don't have something, or I forgot an ingredient at the store. So they're pretty forgivable, but they taste really good and they're pretty simple. They go right in the oven, and you can make a big batch if you want and even freeze half of them for later. So here we go. First things first, we are going to get our turkey. This is actually 1.5 pounds of turkey. 1 pound yields like 16 to 20 meatballs, so 1.5 pounds is like 25-ish. Turkey often gets a really bad rap for being bland and being too dry. It tends to be more lean to begin with. I'm going to up the fat content a little bit to retain some of that moisture. I also forgot to preheat the oven. We're going to get that started while we work on the meatball assembly. So oven to 375, and I like them at 375 over 400 because they won't dry out as much. We're planning this for another day, so we're going to make them, cook them all the way through, and then I'm going to freeze half of them for later. The basic ingredients in all meatballs are the meat, an egg or 2, breadcrumbs, aromatics like onion and garlic, and herbs and spices. As written is for about 1 pound of meat, so I would call for 1 egg and half a cup of most of these things. And again, because I'm doing 1.5 pounds, trying to meal plan in advance, I'm adding a little more to all of these. I'm going to start with my onion, and I keep all my onion in the fridge, like if I only need a chunk of it, in a glass container, because I find that the plastic reusable containers end up smelling like onion forever and you'll never get it out. And I'm actually going to grate my onion rather than chop it. The onion has a ton of water content, so by grating it, you'll get all the juice from the onion in with the meat, and it'll add so much more flavor and more moisture that is always needed in meatballs. Ooh, that onion was strong. My eyes are watering. I grated about 3/4 of a cup of onion. Another reason I like grating the onion instead of chopping it by hand, I like the texture better. It's a lot finer. When I dice it, no matter how finely I dice it, there's still going to be chunks that just don't really cook all the way through, and you're going to get that raw, really sharp bite of an onion in the middle of the meatball, which kind of ruins the experience. I'm going to do the garlic. Just like I did with the onion, I'm going to grate the garlic. We're going to add the rest of the wet stuff. I actually only had 1 egg. Looking through my fridge, I had a little bit of Caesar dressing left. So this is a really assertive flavor. Because it already has cheese in it, I don't feel bad not using quite as much cheese as I would in my recipe, because I was also saving some other cheese, and I'm trying to cut down on how many times I go to the store this week. I think this is like a 1/4 cup. Because the flavor is already similar with the garlic and the cheese in the dressing, and the dressing has oil in it, as all salad dressings do, it'll add more fat to it to help give it some more flavor, because fat is where the flavor is. An egg, just 1 egg in there. This is about 3/4 of a cup of almond meal. I also figured that the almond meal instead of breadcrumbs would be a good move because it has more fat content, more moisture in it than regular breadcrumbs. It's more than a 1/2 cup. But not much more, of grated shaved Parmesan cheese. I'm going to try and break some of this up as I crumble it in. Normally I like to buy the pre-grated stuff, like from the deli section, not in the jar on the shelf. Kind of keeping in line with the Caesar flavor with the garlic and Parmesan, I'm going to add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. Worcestershire is sometimes used in Caesar dressing when you don't have anchovy paste, and that's because there's anchovies in Worcestershire sauce. I think like a teaspoon or 2. I'm still going to put a good pinch of salt in there. I figure I can use a little, maybe 2. I figure I can use a little more salt because the almond meal doesn't have any seasoning in it. The salt isn't going to make it salty, it's just going to enhance the flavor and tie it all together so you can actually notice the onion and the garlic and the nuances of it. If you didn't have Caesar dressing, by the way, you could do ranch dressing, but I've also done it without dressing altogether. I've used more Worcestershire sauce, like a good tablespoon, and about a tablespoon of ketchup, or even tomato paste if that's what you have on hand, or you're trying to use up your extra tomato paste, and it'll help just boost more of the flavor so they don't just taste like plain unsalted cardboard turkey. Do a lot of freshly ground pepper. That's probably a good teaspoon. And then I'm going to do a bunch of fresh parsley. And this is just Italian flat leaf parsley. And I'll generally pull off if I have like long stems, but I'm not going to stress over getting every little bit. Finally chop this up. Go back and forth. And I hold the end of my knife down. I just like the security that I have from that. You want to spray this lightly. Now we're going to start mixing our meatballs together. I know a lot of people get really weirded out by touching the raw meat, but you have to shape them by hand anyway, so I suggest, just braving it. And make sure the egg is really well incorporated in here too. A piece of onion. Sometimes this happens. Pick it out. It won't hurt anything. And those big pieces are cheese, but that's delicious, so we're going to cook that in. And this is really wet, so I'm going to add more breadcrumbs, or almond meal in this case. Added another quarter cup after all because it was looking better, but it felt really wet. And I eyeball it. It's like 2 inches. Try to get them the same size. And they don't really spread either, so you can squeeze quite a few on the sheet. And this is why I advocate for using your hands, because you get a better feel for what the texture is like. Once you fully defrost raw meat, you need to cook it up. For food safety reasons, you can't refreeze it. It also would mess up the texture. But you might as well go ahead and cook up the whole batch or 2 batches of these, and then once the meat is cooked, you can freeze that again. I'm going to squeeze these in because my rules. I made 27. That's close. Last thing I'm going to do before I put them in is spray them, just the tops again with a little bit of oil. We'll check them in 25 minutes. 25 is usually what I do for a pound, so they might need longer. And I will show you how I check if they're done. So I know what you must be thinking. She changed locations while the meatballs were baking. Not the same kitchen, but actually I had some technical issues and I lost some files, so I'm just going to reshoot the ending rather than start all over. As you can see, I just took the meatballs out of the oven, and the best way to tell if they're finished is give them a little tap on top. They should feel solid. They shouldn't feel too wet or mushy. If they do, they need another minute or 2 to keep firming up. Tonight we're going to simmer these in some marinara sauce and serve them over pasta. If you plan to reheat them later, just add them into the pot of sauce until the sauce is gently simmering. And since these meatballs are already cooked, we don't want to cook them all the way through again because they'll get tough. So if you need to cut one in half to make sure that it's hot enough, I won't tell anybody. Eat your evidence. I do. To freeze the meatballs, let them come to room temperature for about 30 minutes after taking them out of the oven, and then store them in a freezer-safe container for up to 3 months. Once frozen, they can go right into your sauce to cook later. Just simmer the sauce longer. If you let them defrost first, the water content could cause them to fall apart or get mushy. Making these again taught me something new. Even with a recipe like this that I've made dozens of times, I can find ways to tweak and improve it. So if you are grossed out by raw meat, you can mix the meat and add all the other ingredients together with a spatula or a spoon until it's all thoroughly combined. And then here's the key to knowing that. It's when the meat should come together away from the sides of the bowl, like one big meatball. If most of it's still sticking to the sides of the bowl, you need to add more dry ingredients like your breadcrumbs or your almond meal or whatever you're using. Then you can use a medium to large ice cream or like cookie dough scoop to form the meatballs. So to recap, these are juicy, flavorful turkey meatballs that can be made ahead of time. They freeze really well and they're so simple. It's just ground turkey, egg, a little bit of umami flavor, a dry binder, onion, garlic, and herbs. So when you make these meatballs, be sure to tag me at olivejess.co on Instagram and use the hashtag #cookwithconfidence. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.